Yeah, that's so true. Well, it's interesting when you were sharing that about the right time. I've had coaches tell me, business coaches tell me, is you don't want to share it when you're still hemorrhaging from whatever happened. You want to tell it after it's a scar, the wound has healed, because when you're in it, it's a little too raw. And like, I would have never told my cancer story in the beginning because I would have been a complete mess. When I processed it and got through to the other side is when I was able to tell the story.
Right. And I always say you tell it a little before you feel ready.
Hey there, it's Suzanne Oshima, life coach for women in midlife, and your fellow sister on a mission to empower and inspire you through the twists and turns of midlife. I'm here to help you transform it into your best life with the Life is Now, Do It While You Can podcast. We only get one life, so let's make it count, and I'm super excited to dive into this new journey together. Welcome, everybody, to the Life is Now, Do It While You Can show. I'm Suzanne Oshima, and I'm a life coach for women over 50. And today we have a very special guest, Devorah Spillman, and she's a soul storyteller coach. And I'm so excited to have her here today because today we're talking about how to stop hiding and tell your stories. So welcome, Devorah. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's fun to talk about my favorite subject.
I know. Well, the first question for you is, how did you become a soul storyteller?
Well, you know what I'm going to have to do, right?
What's that?
Tell a story. Once a long time. No, I'm kidding. It was actually a long time ago. So I'm going to tell you the very start and then the end. So the very start of becoming a storyteller is I was working with children at the age of 18, and I had always loved working with children. And I was playing tag, and I was chasing the children, and they were saying, nah, you can't get me. I really hate that. So I said, if you want me to chase you, say iggledy-biggledy-boo. So they're going higgly, fliggly, liggly, wiggly, waggly. Finally, in self-defense, I was tired. I said, sit down, I'll tell you a story. And out of my mouth comes, once there was an iggledy-biggledy-boo that lived in Zambadoodle. I just started making up this story. And the next day they begged me to tell it again. And the wildest boys that would never sit for anything, they would sit for as long as I would tell that story. Thousands of Zambadoodle stories later, I've told those stories to thousands and thousands of children all over the world. And later on, I became really reconnected with my Jewish spiritual roots. So I then started making up Jewish spiritual stories. And then to fast forward, in about, I think it was like around 2012-13, the Jewish school I was in, they lost their visionary care about storytelling. Their director just wanted me to teach this Hebrew, this language, do this. And I became invisible. And finally I got fired. It was embarrassing, but I know it was the hand of God. And then I went, well, what is the shape of what I want to do now? And so I went through a lot of people, like I heard in your story, the iteration. So I helped a friend win a multi-million-dollar contract using my metaphor selling technique. And he's like, Devorah, I'm making you a website. So my first website was called Spillman Story Selling. But the thing is, I started telling people, look, if you don't want to go deep, don't call me. I only do deep and a little wacky. Well, that sort of did me in for a certain crowd. And for a lot of people in coaching, you kind of find that you coach yourself, kind of. Like you find your tribe. And so I realized at a certain point that I really wanted, or I really just was coaching women. And we were going deep and we were tapping into the intuition. And I was using the guided process that I used to make up original stories when I created them in the schools on every subject you can imagine. And I realized I could give the women I worked with the same access to their spiritual source and their imagination as I did to kids. So I created a guided process and I changed the name of what I do to In Story. Go in to your deepest soul place and you bring your story out. And I created a guided process that has the acronym STATE that gives every single person access to a term I've coined called spiritual imagination. And this is now my passion. Just like you, this group of midlife women, we have something to say, but so many are still in hiding.
Oh my goodness. I love that. And you're so right. And you have said that so many women are stuck in midlife, and you've said also that the life you were meant to live is on the other side of your story. And it breaks my heart because I feel like, and full transparency, I've been guilty of this. I've hidden from my story because of shame and guilt. So, how can a woman start telling her story and not feel that shame or guilt? And when I say that, what I mean by shame or guilt is like the shame or guilt from a divorce or breakup, or that her husband cheated on her, or like one of the things that I'm noticing is being forced into early retirement when you were not expecting it. And there's the shame and hiding from that. So, how can a woman really step into telling her story from a power place?
So, first of all, a couple of things. First of all, you don't do it by sitting at home alone in your living room, because we carry the wrong audience around in our head. So if I'm thinking of telling my story to the people who I was hurt by, or who don't get me, or who aren't doing any deep work on their spiritual selves at all, and I carry that audience in my head, I'm not going to tell them that vulnerable, spiritual, deep, transformational story, because they don't want to hear it. And so I have a couple of mottos I've really developed that really help. And one of them is, if it moves you, it will move your tribe. So what happens is, people don't start to want to tell their stories till they start to get back up out of them. You're not trying to tell someone else your story when you still need to go to your therapist to just get out of bed in the morning. But once you've had a turning point moment where you are standing back up and you are feeling this calling of your soul, and you feel lit up, like you have something to say that matters, then first of all, you have to find a tribe. This is part of what you do. It's what I do. It doesn't work to do it alone. And then what happens is, this is another really beautiful thing. What I have realized, and this is so true, is you can tell the stories of the darkness when you are standing in the light.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. So, one of the things that you've also said is, when you're and I love that you said this. When I got such a visual from this, is you said, when you're without our stories, we are in the gray. And can you share with the ladies, because I was just like, wow, that is so powerful. And so can you share with my audience, what does that really mean when you're standing in the gray?
So think about kind of our stereotypical image of corporate world. I used to say, in corporate, they say, please hang your story up at the door before you come in. Think about it. In that world, you're not encouraged to be colorful. You're not encouraged to tell like what your spiritual experiences are, what happened to you when you were trying to figure something out. And so you begin to be, you could say it's gray. It also feels constricted. Like a lot of women will have done a work that was okay for a while, like whether it's nursing or teaching or in a business, whatever. And at a certain point, it's like it starts to feel like you're in too small of a container. It's like the world is too tight. You've done this growth, you're feeling more expanded, and you've entered into this world that's very colorful and creative. The women who I work with, they're like, I can't talk about any of this at work. Like my corporate women, they come to me and they're like, I'm feeling all this creativity and all this expansion and these angels and guides and dreams and all of this amazing stuff. And I can't tell anyone at work. And when I even ask them to start talking about it, it's so hard for them because they're still carrying that audience in their head. But if you spend time telling what's really going on with you to other very expanded, open, creative, spiritual women, and they are moved by what you say, it starts to rewire that fear. And the whole thing about the world is gray without our stories really, without stories, humans don't know. We don't know who we are. We spend most of our time listening to stories. We watch TV, we go to movies, we read books, we read posts. We love stories. And there are really amazing, beautiful stories, and there are really terrible stories. Part of why I created this concept of spiritual imagination is because imagination is one of those great gifts that schools have suppressed largely. But it can be used to create disgusting junk. And spirituality can go over into like too constricted and, too rigid. And so if you put spirituality and imagination together, this is a magic realm. This is a realm where you have the free pass of imagination and the elevation of spirituality. So you're not fundamentalist in your religion, and you're not fighting science that's saying, oh, you can't really talk to angels, or spirituality is not, or religion saying you can't talk to angels. So science and spirituality, science and religion don't care about imagination because it's not true, so they don't care. But if you only have imagination without that expanded spiritual consciousness, it won't work. The women who land in my world land there because you are being called to something higher, something in your soul, something from God, from source, the universe, whatever words you use. Women come to me all the time, say, I know I'm supposed to do something more. I can feel it, but I don't know the shape of it. And I say, this is a good problem to have. It's a problem of richness. It's a problem of fullness, of expansion, of fulfillment. But if you want to help the next person, you do have to shape it, right? Because otherwise, think of a river. If I can go stick my head in the river and I can get a drink and I can love it, but if I want to bring some of that life-giving water to someone else, I have to make a vessel. So a vessel for my spiritual creative self, it might be a book, it might be speaking, it might be a podcast, could be teaching, it could be many, many forms, but it won't be any form that leaves your living room if you sit at home by yourself in the spin cycle, thinking and thinking and thinking, and then, this, and then you could just take another course, right? And after that course, you're going to just take another course and another, and then you're in the endless cycle that you're never ready.
Right. So, it's funny because as you've been talking since we started, I got this visual, like when you were talking about corporate women in corporate America, I felt them confined in this little box. And then I feel like when they get out and they retire, that they feel free and they can tell their story. But I can also see and feel that these strong, independent women who were so successful in corporate America can feel like, oh God, this fear of, I can't be vulnerable. I can't show a weakness that's true to my story, but I'm too afraid to share that story. So how can a woman overcome that fear and be vulnerable when she was never vulnerable in corporate America?
You have to join something with other different people. Like you have to be in a group with other like-minded, spiritual, creative women who are being vulnerable with you. You just can't sit alone at home with that audience in your head. It drives you crazy. Women, we don't do it alone anyway. It's just not our way. We do things together.
We like community, right?
We love community. Look, I read everything you're up to is all about that. We need each other. Right. So when you come into a group and you're a little nervous to share, so what happens to women in my world? So I have a whole year program people can do with me in Story Way. And if they come in, they start to very nervously share things they get from their guided process. And the women are moved by it. And they're uplifted. They go, me too, or I feel that, or I can't believe you said that. And you see directly that people are moved by what you say, by what your story is. So in my big program, once they get a little more confident, I put them on as speakers on my international interview series. And so that's very challenging. And in my 8-week program, I created a storytelling recital. at the end. I kind of like to bring back the old names of show and tell, but they have to tell a 10-minute story. And it is really unbelievable what I have heard women tell and how moved they were by the way the other women were moved. Here I'll ask you this question. Have you ever been moved by somebody's story?
Oh, I love hearing people's stories. Like, I get moved all the time.
So does every single person in the world. No one has ever answered no to that question. But here's the second question. And you can think a little back in your past to this. Will people be moved by your story?
Well,
just stop for a second. See that reaction? Almost everyone, when I ask them, they don't say no, but they don't quite say yes either. They go,
well, here's why I pause though. So back before I was a coach, I would have said no. Now that I'm a coach, I would say yes. And the only reason why I say that is because I told a story a couple years ago that I was terrified to tell. And the story was that I was diagnosed with cancer. I actually withheld it from my audience for a year because I didn't want to be the face of cancer. And I didn't want people to feel sorry for me when they heard, oh my God, she has cancer. And so I kind of like put it in a drawer, shoved it down. But then as I started to go along on my journey, I started to realize how selfish that was. And the reason why I say that is because my journey with this cancer diagnosis has been a wake-up call. It's been a wake-up call to live my life differently, to shift the priorities in my life, and to do things different. And I said to myself, I'm all about helping women, inspiring and empowering women. And I said, if I withhold this from people, it's not helping them. Someone else tomorrow is going to get diagnosed with cancer, and I could help empower them because I was on that journey and I'm in a different place today. Like, it woke me up. So now and people love the story. I mean, not love that I have cancer, but they love connecting to that because it's like that you said, that Me Too moment of, oh my God, me too. I feel the same way. So,
but the difference is, and what's important to note is it's not always appropriate to tell the story right away. Because while you're in it, you're in the pain, you're in the darkness. So you're not in the turning point moment or the transformation. So if you're a year later and it's now your awakening, it's your wake-up call. So that's you're standing in the light and you can tell the stories of the darkness. Because honestly, nobody wants to hear our story. This is the other weird thing. They don't care about our story. They care about themselves. So if you just started talking about your cancer, it would have made them all feel awkward. You're right. If you told it too soon, it wouldn't have helped them. It was only when you understood how to help yourself that you knew you could help them. And so when you're right in the middle of something, like if someone's in my group and a family member dies, she tells us and we help her. But maybe she doesn't talk about it on her interview. Right? Maybe not yet, but you have somewhere, like when you were going through it, you had your close circle you did talk to, but you didn't talk to your public audience until you could help them. You see what I mean? So that's how to think about it. You need support right when you're going through a hard time, but when you have a turning point and you realize this is lifting me up, I have now turned to seeing how this is a teacher to me, an awakening, a healing, then I can turn around and I can help the next person maybe have that experience quicker, that awakening. We don't awaken by ourselves, generally speaking. I mean, occasionally down on the dark floor of the night, but generally we help each other.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, it's interesting when you were sharing that about the right time. I've had business coaches tell me, is you don't want to share it when you're still hemorrhaging from whatever happened. You want to tell it after it's a scar, the wound has healed, because when you're in it, it's a little too raw. And I would have never told my cancer story in the beginning because I would have been a complete mess. When I processed it and got through to the other side is when I was able to tell the story.
Right. And I always say you tell it a little before you feel ready.
Oh, interesting. Now, why do you say that?
Not you, because you always are going to be feel a little vulnerable. When you go to tell like you have to have somewhere supportive to tell it. So when people are in my program, they're telling one of those stories, it's pre-recorded. They're telling it to me, but they're brave enough and we decide they're ready because they have an insight. They have an awakening. They have wisdom. If you haven't gained any wisdom, don't share it yet because we don't want to hear each other complain. Like, really, complaining is not the thing. It's wisdom. Like this is a whole other area and we can talk about it a little more. I really discovered sort of 3 areas of wisdom that really help you know if you have a story worth telling.
Can you go deeper on that? I really want to touch on this because and go deeper is because I find that some people will tell the story from the complaining mode and victim mode, and we want to really help people understand that that's not an empowering place to come from. So can you share a little bit about that?
That's just true. If you're whining and complaining, that's fine. Just choose the person who loves you and is healing you. You are not the healer when you need to whine and complain. But it's okay if you need to just go to someone who's a coach, a healer, go to someone to help you. You can't help someone else when you're whining and complaining. That's just simply true. But here's a tip to help you. Now, you can have 2, I like to call it 2 rooms. I can have the room over here where I go to my husband or my best friend or someone, I'm whining and complaining and freaking out. Okay. I can go over to this room where I'm clear and elevated and wise and smart. They don't have to cancel each other out. You don't have to wait till nothing is a wreck in your life. That's just not a thing. Like, we have parts of our life that are a wreck, that are not perfect, like join the human race. But I'm not training that. I'm not teaching that. Like if my spiritual life is a wreck, I'm going to pause and not teach. But my spiritual life is great. So I can teach that. But if something is going on with one of my children, so I don't teach I don't teach parenting. So it's okay if that's happening, right? Or my husband went through an illness. So I don't teach that. But I do teach how do you manage it? How do you get up no matter what? So here's a really cool thing about wisdom. All right. I discovered this when I did a series that I did called the Wisdom course, the Wisdom series. And I realized there are 3 kinds of wisdom that we have. And the one is the one we think about all the time, which is what I call your lived wisdom. And this is usually the only one people think about, like what's happened to you? What's your life experience? How have you gotten up? That's really, really important. But you also have what I call your learned experience. So there are some people, all they think about is their lived experience, and others are all they think about is their learned experience. If you're a lawyer, you learned a ton. That still matters. How many courses have you taken? That's your learned wisdom. You're super smart. You're really well trained. You've learned a ton. And then there's what I call your let in wisdom or your intuitive wisdom. And this is the one that often we haven't been trained to trust, to develop or trust. But it is probably what makes you the most unique. It's the thing that comes to you in the middle of the night, out in the forest, the things that come to you where I go back to where you just love it so much. And so often, if I ask all of you watching, have you ever had that moment where you just wrote something like, oh my God, that's so good, or you made art and you're like, so good, and then you don't show anybody? Because you don't trust yourself. But here's that motto again. If it moves you, it will move your tribe. Okay? And this is just true. You have to find your tribe. You're not trying to move the person in the top executive office. They're not ready for you. So don't start there. Start with your tribe. Who is in your tribe? They will be moved by you because they don't know exactly what you know. You have your lived wisdom. That's your story. Often our stories are our credentials, literally. You have your lived wisdom. How have you gotten back up over and over? What have you learned? Just like that's why you can tell your cancer story and why it moves people, because you got back up. It knocked you down and you figured out how to get back up. And now you can turn around and tell that story to help the next person. And that makes a huge difference. We really do make a huge difference to each other. So you have your lived wisdom. How did you get back up? All the things you've learned, and In-Store is all about integrating all of who you are. And then you've got to let in that other realm, that intuitive, that spiritual, that unseen realm. And when you let that in, it's probably the most important thing we're emphasizing right now that I see in the women I work with is we have to honor that part.
Yeah. It's interesting while you were talking about that and how we don't trust our intuition that it's going to connect, is the visual I got is about dropping out of your head and dropping into your heart, and really trusting that heart and gut intuition, right? So this has been amazing, Devora. I loved everything that you shared. And it's so important for us as women in midlife to really own our stories and not hide from them. And like you've said before, is that it leads to personal growth, right? So, Devora, how can people find you?
So if you want to experience a guided process to really tap into that, if you go to my website, which is my name, and you put in your name, you'll get this free guided process that you can do. And then you'll have a way to reach out and connect with me. So just go to DevoraSpillman.com.
If you're ready to transform midlife into your best life, but you've been feeling a little isolated and alone on this journey, I can help you make new connections with like-minded women and create lasting friendships. Just head on over to SuzanneOshima.com and grab my free ebook, It's Never Too Late to Make New Friends.